Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 7, Episode 1. It is called The New Deal. So, full spoilers for the episode as always, and so we begin the final season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which, now we weren't doing reviews from Season 1. It started a little bit before we did, but this show has been here since we started reviewing TV shows, so it feels kind of prominent that we're here now in its 7th and final season after all this time.
We must have started with what, season 3, maybe?
The way we do it now, yeah, season 3 was the start of the reviews.
Yeah, I think we were talking about it a little bit before that. So
it's kind of that and Better Call Saul, the ones that we kind of started. We don't have like season 1 reviews up for Saul either. It kind of started with season 2 and the way we do it now, but. So we're kind of coming to the end of these shows that have been here since the start, so it feels kind of prominent in that sense at a personal level. But of course, it's nice to know it's the final season. It's nice to come into it knowing it's the final season. It's nice for the writers, so that means they get to wrap up their story and know they're not cliffhangering for a future season. Interesting choice to have this season set in the past, and that was the big setup at the end of last season, was that we're coming back to 1931, which interestingly predates even Captain America, just for the context of fitting it into the overall universe. This predates even that, so it's not like we have to run into things that are,
No, this comfortably is far enough removed to just do whatever it wants.
Yeah. So, and we start off, Chromicons are showing up as well, of course. They were kind of on their way here first, trying to take out S.H.I.E.L.D. from history. We get revealed by the end, of course, exactly how they're planning to do that. But at least to begin with, they are stealing the identities, body snatcher style, of a couple of policemen from the time period. I actually quite like the actor who plays the policeman that the main Chromicon takes over. Because obviously he's got a different face at first, but once he's become the policeman, that's who it is. It's this actor.
Yeah, the face stealing reminded me a lot of an episode of Doctor Who. Specifically the effect of just the blank faces left behind. There was a pretty good episode of Doctor Who in I think it was one of Tennant's episodes. I think it might have been in season 3 of the newer stuff, where the TV was stealing people's faces. That was pretty good. But it reminded me of that visually quite a lot.
The visual I really liked was actually after that. It was the faceless Chromicons, when we see them, because the main police guy's already switched, but the other two haven't yet. So when the bootlegger comes in with the booze, because it's in Prohibition, of course, which is a big thing that's mentioned throughout the episode.
I couldn't cope with that.
But he comes in and he sees these two Chromicons stand up with no faces, and I really liked how they looked without skin. It was kind of like, there's a little bit of the host from Westworld, but there's a little bit of I'm thinking that character on the bridge in Star Trek Discovery. There's a little bit of her in there.
It reminds me a little bit of Ex Machina.
Yeah, a little bit of that. But it was basically a concoction of a lot of different sci-fi robots. But it looked creepy. It was got that kind of featureless quality to it that gives it a creepy vibe.
Yeah, it worked.
So that's the setup of the episode, and we jump straight back into LMD Coulson. And I think if there was anything concern getting into this season. Now, I don't remember what I said.
It was a long time ago now.
They showed this at the end of last season, because it was a year ago. Or near enough, anyway. I don't know what I said exactly, but I'm sure I probably had some concern of, is it a bit cheap they're bringing Coulson?
I have a vague recollection of at least feeling that. Okay, we just had a great ending for Coulson. Does it feel weird to just immediately, not undo that, but have an excuse to have the actor back for the final season?
And while, I think you can be cynical and still talk about, okay, we're thinking of an excuse to have the actor, because ultimately that's really what it is. I think a big thing for me in this episode is that immediately this Coulson's like, well, I'm not really Coulson. I've got Coulson's memories up to a certain point, and you've kind of filled in the blanks since the framework, because that's where this version of Coulson comes from. It's like, okay, so he was in the framework, so all that data is kind of there. So this is technically Coulson, in that he's got Coulson's personality, he's got Coulson's history, and he's, as we see throughout the episode, his fanboy obsessions and things of that nature.
Every memory that Coulson ever had, right up until that moment in the framework. Yeah.
So it is very Coulson. It's just for him to still act like Coulson, sound like Coulson, and be like Coulson. But I think I appreciate that he's immediately aware that he's not the real Coulson. He knows that Coulson died. In fact, that's one of the little dramatic beats, as he's kind of like, essentially he's about to ask the question, why am I an LMD? Why was I created? Why do I exist? And before he even finishes the question, he realizes, oh, I died. So
yeah,
he gets that. He gets that. And I think that works. But I also like the idea that as the episode goes on, he kind of gets into the prospect of, like, now he's a robot who's got super strength. He's like, hey, I'm kind of a superhero now. It's this Coulson who's getting to live out like a weird fantasy of his, kind of on his own in a vacuum, even if the actual Coulson, of course, has already moved on and is gone. But everyone's aware that he's an LMD. I think I appreciate that Sky almost immediately, when they were still questioning, like, how much do we tell him, because you got Gemma there, you got Mac. I was trying to think of Daisy's name, but yes, you got Mac there as well, and they're standing there, and they're like, okay, what do we tell him? What do we do? And she just immediately shouts out, "You're LMD," and Mac and Gemma is just kind of like, yeah, I guess that was a bit insensitive. Do you really wanted to? It's like, well, how else do you say it? You just have to kind of throw it out there and go with it.
Yeah, I appreciate that they treat him differently, not badly, but just there's always this awareness that this isn't really Coulson, and they don't treat him the same as they did Coulson.
No, so they want his expertise around, they want his guidance around, but they know it's not really him. But at the same time, he does have thoughts and feelings, so he's not just like a piece of data either. He's especially now that he's turned on. I imagine the longer he's turned on, the more like an actual living being he kind of becomes. Not necessarily Coulson again, but just something that's very like Coulson.
A different version of Coulson, yeah. I think it's interesting, you mentioned that, is because one of the first things that happens is, he's getting all this information from the past 2 years kind of hit him at once, and he's kind of struggling, and Mac hits the shutdown button, and Daisy's immediately like, no, you can't do that. You can't just turn him off. In the idea that no, this is he is basically a person. You can't just turn him off like that without his consent.
Yeah, and even later on, he talks about how it's kind of weird. There's a button. There's just a button to turn me on and turn me off. It's actually very Star Trek. It's very Data.
Yeah, I assume this will come up in some very relevant point.
Oh, for sure. There's going to be some dramatic beat where either someone presses the button against his will to turn them off, or vice versa, or something. There'll be some big dramatic button pressing moment, which is which is fine. So we have, throughout the episode, they're investigating this. They're back in 1931 because Simmons and Fitz, who's absent notably, that was one of the big plot points from the end of the last season, is that they don't know where each other are, so they can't, because they've been scanned by the Chromicons, so they can't know where each other are. It's a whole safety precaution. It means there's no Fitz this episode, so we're, much like season 5, we're building up to when Fitz is going to appear. But they've basically got this new area on the ship ready, which is filled with 1930s-esque weapons, things like that. Although she did note they weren't quite sure exactly when they were coming back to. They had the sort of ballpark, but this is actually a little bit earlier. So I wonder if it'll come up that some of their weapons are actually slightly ahead. Like, this is like a 1940s model or something like that, which won't stick out too much, but
maybe you'll get someone notice something at some point.
Yeah, I could see them playing with that a little touch, but so it's basically, okay, we're here to stop the Chromicons. They're going to try and stop S.H.I.E.L.D. from ever happening. And it's like, okay, there's already been a murder, there's already been these policemen showing up without faces, and they go, and there's a lot of fun stuff playing with the time throughout the episode. I think if there was going to be concerns about the new setting, the new stuff, number one setting is because there's Agent Carter existing, is this just going to become Agent Carter, and Agent Carter was really boring. I'm sorry, but it was. For anyone's a fan of that show, I love it all you want, but I found it tedious to get through. But of course, this is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. characters. It's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. writing. It's not the same thing.
It's better, is what we're saying.
It's better, yes. But the characters are playing off each other wonderfully. There's several things. There's a moment where Sky, when they get at the crime scene, and the cop at the door is kind of like, what's a gal doing with you? What's a gal like you doing trying to join the Mounties? What they said, they were the Canadian Mounties, I think they said. Yeah. Was the law enforcement branch they were claiming to be from. And she kind of has to... And my favourite part of her reaction, actually, was just the way she sort of, as she's sighing, goes, okay. Like there's a moment of like just her thinking, okay, well, I know what I'm about to deal with. And of course Mac has a thing throughout the whole episode where he's constantly, and they never quite like, he's addressing it head on and the show's addressing it head on, but it's never quite, it never quite lets the person get far enough to actually do the racist thing. But there's a lot of moments where they're
just
getting
the odd look here or there.
There's a look here or there. There's assumptions of who he is based on Coulson. I think at one point when we get to Patton Oswalt, he calls him his shadow, and then later on, the guy at the bar kind of yells when he's undercover and he's serving drinks. He's yelling at him, and Matt kind of finished that sentence, and the guy's like, "Oh no, you're big and scary. I'm going to walk away."
Yeah, I mean, it's even early on the first time they're out on the streets when he's they're all in these nice clothes that Deke's gone and bought. And he's like, oh, he's getting looks, and he's like, oh, people aren't comfortable seeing me in this fancy suit. So he's addressing it right off the bat.
And I appreciate how it's handled. I don't expect it to be constant every episode, but I think in this first episode they really had to acknowledge it. They had to kind of talk about it a little bit, because otherwise it'd feel kind of weird that no one's really noticing or saying anything.
Yeah.
Even as something as simple as well as Skye being part of the law enforcement, it's weird in the time period. In fact, she has to cut off her purple hair to fit in, which Mac looked even a little bit scared telling her that. It's like I dig the purple, it's great, but it's got to go.
Work here. Yeah. It seems perfectly reasonable.
It's going to stick out. In 1931. So. You have all these world building elements, and you have the Patton Oswalt stuff where, because they tease whoever runs this secret underground branch of what would eventually become this, which would eventually become S.H.I.E.L.D. And we're like, okay, it's going to be someone we know in some capacity. It has to be. And you hear the voice, and I immediately recognized the voice, and I went, oh, here we go. This is who all the Patton Oswalds are based on. This is
because he has a very distinctive voice, to be fair.
Yeah. So he comes out with his little mustache, and he's running the whole game.
He's a bit of a gangster.
And they're basically all just, they convince him to help just by saying, oh, there's a new gang in town. The Chromicons are the new gang in town. And that's how he ends up helping. And we end up with this big fake out. The plot of the second half of the episode is that they think it's FDR. They think because FDR, who's governor right now, they think he's going to be assassinated by the Chromicons because he eventually starts, was it SSR?
SSR, yeah, which is the precursor to S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm assuming this was what they were in Agent Carter.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it was. Yeah, but they think that's what they're assassinating. There's a lot of like Coulson fanboying because he's a big fan, and everyone's kind of like starstruck because it's like really him. This is the first time they've seen someone famous at the time who they know. It's not just a case of whatever. And even something as simple as Daisy saying, "Oh, it's not in black and white." I mean, I knew that, but
you never see it like this. Yeah.
So. You have all that stuff, but the fake out is, of course, that it's actually just the random bartender named Freddie who's the target, and why? Who is he? And I think, being used to time travel stories, we're all kind of assuming, okay, he's someone's father, or he's someone's grandfather, he's someone down the line.
Yeah.
And it turns out to be Gideon's father, who obviously was the head of, played by Powers Booth, who passed away tragically, in the last couple of years, but he was obviously the head of Hydra, and the idea being that if you take out Hydra, then S.H.I.E.L.D's never formed. So the actual cliffhanger to the episode before the little post-credit scene is actually, oh shit, to actually save S.H.I.E.L.D, we have to save Hydra. So it's this conflicting thing.
It's a pretty interesting angle to take, because it's them having to support this horrible organization, but they know that it's a necessary evil for the future to exist in the way that it does.
Well, that kind of leads us on nicely to the time travel discussion and the theories, because they're obviously trying not to cause any disturbances or change anything, and Deke kind of offers his opinion on how time travel works, that it's not the butterfly effect. It's not one little thing will ripple out and change everything everywhere forever. It's more the stream theory, the idea that so if you're in a stream and you sort of jump in, but the water will still flow around you. It'll change things a little bit, but it'll ultimately keep going the same direction and end up in the same place. But if there's too many things, you build a dam. I thought it was weird how he phrased it. We call that a dam. I'm like, I think we're all familiar with what a dam is.
I only think that works because it's Deke, and he still hasn't quite got the grasp of what everyone knows and what they don't know.
Yeah, maybe that's true. Maybe that's why he said it that way. But I was like, Deke, we know what a dam is. He said it as if it's this weird concept that people wouldn't understand. And that would ultimately change the flow of the whole stream, therefore changing the course of history. So, I think for a TV show, if we're not going to get into wacky multiverse ideas, which I don't necessarily, nothing about the show so far, this episode has told me that it wants to go in that direction. The stream theory makes the most sense because it means they can have some fun, but they don't have to worry about.
Yeah, it's a theory that we're kind of all familiar with. I think if you're fans of time travel things, you've probably seen this in one or another, at some point. But it makes sense for this because it gives them leeway to do some stuff and have a bit of fun. And then there is always that danger of, is this the moment that goes too far? Is this the moment that builds the dam?
Well,
that you can play with that tension.
There's two possible outcomes, because I'm assuming we're going to see a little bit of present day, even if it's just the very last episode for a little bit. There's two possible outcomes. One, we do the Back to the Future thing where they come back and there's one small difference just to show that they have changed the present day. Because in Back to the Future, it's the Twin Pines Mall becomes the Lone Pine Mall, for example. I mean, there's more than that, but that's the little one, right? And or you do the opposite thing, which is no, they were always going to come back here, and whatever they did was always going to happen. Which
I think is interesting because that's the rules S.H.I.E.L.D. played by before with the monolith time travel to the future.
Yes. But that was constantly cycling until it got out of its loop because they eventually fixed it.
This feels different, so maybe this gives them an excuse to play with different rules.
Possibly. So they bring up this conversation at least, so we have this in our head. Where they're not just ignoring the time travel elements. I mean, there's always things to nitpick at. There's always ways you can break it down and say this doesn't work for that reason. You always can with time travel, but this is at least means that no, we're thinking about it. The characters are thinking about it. The writers are thinking about it. We've all got it on our head, so it's not being ignored, even if you ultimately end up disagreeing with how they decide to tackle elements of it here or there.
Yeah, as a rule, I'm willing to let things slide when it comes to time travel if the story is satisfying, as long as it's not too big. Obviously, if they just completely throw their rules out the window, then that's just frustrating.
Please see The Flash first example of that.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm willing to give most time travel stories some creative freedom, that little bits here or there for the sake of their story, as long as it's not too egregious.
Yeah. So we got all that stuff, and so this is the son of Gideon, or the father of Gideon, makes more sense, and they're going to have to help him and keep him alive. Fun little bits in the fighting when they actually fight the Chromicons at the party, backstage and stuff. I liked how Skye, there's like a moment where she hits one of them with a bat or like a metal rod, and she just says out loud, 1930s baseball reference. That's all she says because she doesn't know any, so she just says 1930s baseball reference.
Yeah, that got me good. And then there's all this jazz score going on in the room, that the party's being hosted in, and it makes very very unique backdrop for S.H.I.E.L.D. It's very different.
Yeah, we've got an old timey title card as well at the start.
Yeah, it was that was kind of cool to see.
Yeah. So one of the other things that happens though is when they're investigating the crime scene, but after Mac and that run off to check out the secret underground meeting place, they end up fighting the Chronicons. Skye ends up fighting one and sort of using her powers to like launch him out of the air and land in the truck. Fun little beat I enjoyed here. I mean, I'm actually saying all this just to set up the subplot of the episode when we go back to Simmons and that, but I do want to mention as well while I'm here that I did really appreciate when Deke, who presumably doesn't do a lot of driving, given where he's from and what he does, he's like, oh, because she's like, can you get that truck running? And he's like, oh, internal combustion? I think I can do that, because he's an engineer, right? And then after he does it, he sort of does this little thing with his hand. He's like, eh, and she's like, yes, I'm very proud. That's good.
It's just that moment of waiting for the recognition that they got me good. Basically, everything Deke said in this episode was great.
Yes.
Like him being so excited that, hey, all this stuff's so cheap, and they're like, yeah, it's the Great Depression, you dick.
Yeah, he's got a point though. I think it would be really cheap. Now, admittedly, I don't know what I'd want to buy.
Because everyone's really poor.
In 1931, but it would be nice to go back with £10 and just go wild. Be a rich man for a night. I don't know. But anyway, so yeah, they take the Crowcon back, unconscious, but he wakes up and Simmons like ties it to a chair, and they're going to like try and make it talk. Yo-Yo gets a new set of arms, Coulson style, which she's not really for at first, but much like Skye's hair, she can't walk around with bionic arms in 1931. In fact, I would argue that in 2020 you would look a bit weird even with bionic arms walking around.
And you'd probably get a second look, but you might get away with it. People would be like, okay, whatever. Whereas in the 30s, you got no chance.
No, you're like an alien if you walk around with bionic arms in 1931.
Yeah.
So, and there's a nice little touchy moment where she sort of touches her face for the first time, because these arms do have touch. They have the sense of touch. But they're also super powered and are designed to work with her super speed, Simmons said.
It's one of those things where behind the scenes you can see the technical, oh well, we just want to give her hands because we got everything else to work on and this is just easier. But they do a good job of writing it into the script and giving it a character weight that I don't mind, the whatever reason it was that came up with it.
Not only character weight, I'd argue in this case, bizarrely, even though that's still true, it's still like a production ease to just have her have real hands. But I think in this case it's kind of unique in that we already did it with Coulson, and I think we said back when she first got her arms cut off, well, they made Coulson a pretty realistic hand, so why wouldn't they make her some arms that look just as good? So it actually would almost be weirdly inconsistent if they didn't give her arms like this at one point. I think last season they kept having Simmons was trying to make some and but Fitz wasn't necessarily working on them, so it kept getting pushed back and they weren't quite nailing it.
Yeah, and there's also her attitude to it when she's offered them by Simmons, which is like, I don't really want these. I like owning what has happened to me. I don't want to pretend that it didn't happen. So you could have always, I mean, let's say production value was no issue and they weren't stuck in the past. You could always have just addressed this by, Simmons saying, do you want arms? And her just saying no. And that would have solved that problem of why doesn't she?
Oh, sure, yeah. It wouldn't have been a big deal if they hadn't, but I think in this case it actually just makes sense that they give her something. It makes it more consistent with what's already happened previously, on top of just any new reasons that we would maybe have for her to do so. So we have that, and they're questioning the dude, and that's how they figure out the Freddy thing. It's also worth mentioning Enoch is working on May. May's still injured from being stabbed heavily, might we add, from the finale last season. But we actually, the post-credits scene is Enoch kind of loses her because she's not in the little med bay, and you could sort of see the reveal coming. The way the shot was angled, like sort of up the way. And Enoch says something like, oh, how could you lose her, blah, blah, blah. And he walks off, and of course May's up in the ceiling. It's actually a lot like River and Serenity. There's a few beats in Serenity with River that play that way.
Yeah.
But all I think, because it goes to this close-up of May and her head's down, she sort of like looks up, right, and her hair's in front of her face, and all I could think was, is this meant to be a Kaiko impression from The Grudge? Because there's some...
I can see that, yeah.
There's definitely some vibes here. And to be fair, they were referencing The Ring last season in the Simmons Fitz episode in the head.
Oh, they did, yes.
Remember,
yes,
her evil version was based on The Ring or something like that. So it wouldn't be the first time they've done this. Which, by the way, I really appreciate the little callback when Matt goes back to Coulson and wakes him up again after he's been turned off for the first time, and he's like, hey, like, can I trust you? Are you on my team? And Coulson's like, yeah, that's whatever you want, boss, kind of thing. But I appreciate the little callback there where when Max says he never liked the idea of this, Coulson just outright for him says, yeah, of course, you're scared of robots. Look, I like that callback.
That's been a running thing since, what, season 4?
Season 4, yeah, ever since the robots were a thing.
Yeah, it's been consistent, so yeah. It's always nice to just have that referencing and that character continuity.
Yeah, so no, I mean, honestly, there's very little to complain about with this opening episode.
There's nothing to complain about, but it's also not like knock out the park amazing. It's like, no, this is really solid. It does exactly what it needs to do to reintroduce everything where we are. This is okay, establishing the time period. It does everything it needs to do, and it does it really well.
And honestly, I mean, I am actually kind of shocked this was their concept for the last season, because doing the whole thing, I mean, I don't know how long they're going to be in 1931. I get the impression it's going to be most of the season, though.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that this was the concept, because you'd feel like their budget's been getting smaller over the years, and they chose to do a period piece for their final season for the most part. I can't imagine that helps budget constraints. I mean, maybe...
No, and it doesn't look cheap.
No, it looked surprisingly good. Like, I was expecting to, because I remember watching Agent Carr and just feeling that we were always in a room, and maybe that's kind of true here as well, but there was enough street shots. I mean, there was that one, the big shot where they walk out for the first time and they look down the street. Yeah, that was very clearly a visual effect, and it looked like a visual effect, but there was a lot of them walking out after that, and there was...
like, when they were pretending to be mountains, all that bit there out the front, out the back alley, which sure, it's a contained area to Backlot Alley, but it's still like, okay, it's outdoors, it feels appropriate.
I think the point I'm making is there was enough variety in locations that I didn't feel like we were, which amusingly, the opposite of this is actually season 5, which for the first half of the season was just on that one space station, where it kind of felt like, we were spending so much time in the same 5 hallways and 2 rooms. And I mean, I enjoyed a lot of what they were doing there, but you could kind of feel the constraints of the budget, even though every time it cut to an exterior visual effects shot, it looked great. So they were definitely divvying up their budget in a smart way in that sense. They were making they were picking their moments wisely for where they'd spend the money on the visual effects, and they were making it look good. The alternative here, I feel like there's less visual effects to do, so they're spending a lot more in locations and set dressing and all that kind of stuff. So
no, I mean, it's working so far. Like maybe that's why we lose the hands, for example. Like maybe they're not much in the long run, but every little counts when you've got so much else to do.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. But hey, no, I mean, it's just nice to have the characters back. I was feeling at home, sort of meeting them all again, and I'm looking forward to seeing where the end of this journey takes them. And I appreciate that. Even though, because it's funny that this is 7 seasons, and the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer also ran 7 seasons, and I think it's interesting that much like Buffy, the show kind of had its natural endpoint at the end of season 5, and then we got 2 more. And I think this show, with the Chromicons, which it introduced in season 5, has this extra element that they've been building as well through season 6 to kind of still feel quite meaningful to deal with in season 7. And then you add in the idea that we're going back to the early origins of Hydra and how important that is to the history of Shield. It feels like it's bringing back in elements from early on in the show in a way that feels natural, in a way that feels like it's sort of well rounding things off, but at the same time it is doing a new season. It's not just repeating a storyline from previous years.
It's interesting how it is supplemental to the ending of season 5. Right, all of this is technically supplemental, yet is making a point of trying to make it matter as well and do it in its own right.
I'm kind of excited to see how we end this, because I mean, Shield usually does a really good job of making me care about the characters and making me care about where they end up, and I think I'm actually really excited about them not having a cliffhanger, because with the exception of season 5, which is the one notable exception because it was kind of like they thought they might be ending there, all the other seasons all have these big cliffhanger moments, even season 6, and it's because they knew they'd been renewed, admittedly, but we didn't know that until really actually, no, we knew that before the start of the season last year, didn't we?
Yeah, we knew it before the start, because they told us really early.
Yeah, it was weird. But the fact is, though, is because they cut them down to 13 episodes, it almost just kind of feels like you got one more season split in 2. Because when you add up the 2 seasons together, it's only a few more episodes than a regular season.
It is. But I think even though that is the case in terms of just sheer episode count, and if you're binging it, down the line, it won't feel that different in terms of the length overall. Watching it now, okay, you had a season that felt satisfying in its own right and ran over 3-ish months a year ago, and you had a year off and you come back and it still feels like, oh no, this is a whole fresh season. This feels like a true season 7 and not just, oh well, you got a season cut in half.
Oh, sure, don't get me wrong. Yeah, but to be fair though, this show for the past several seasons did a thing where it was splitting its seasons into chapters. And I would maybe argue that season 5 split down the middle with, the future stuff in the space station, and then the half that was afterwards doesn't necessarily feel that much more dissimilar to the split between season 6 and then now this 1931 section.
I would say it feels a bit more distinct in that those two were so closely linked still. Whereas this feels, barring the ending of the last season, very removed from anything else that was in season 6.
Well, I wouldn't say that, because everything with the Chromicons last season built to this.
Sure, but that was all, mostly old subplot stuff. So that subplot is definitely followed through.
But it was there in 11 out of 13 episodes probably. There was only a couple where it shied away from it. Yeah, but for the most part, it was consistently a presence throughout.
It was, yeah.
So I think bizarrely, 6 and 7, if you did lump them together, let's say you're binging this down the line and you're taking gaps between seasons just because you like to do that, I feel like 6 and 7 go nicely together as the one final season at the end, probably, if you're watching them that way.
I think they might well do, yeah.
But yeah, Happy to have it back. Looking forward to the rest of the season and seeing where all these crazy characters end up, and just what May's going to do when she sees LMD Coulson walking around.
I can't wait. For the moment where she has to come in as the cavalry again, right? Maybe the others don't really know exactly what's going on with her, whether she's back properly or not, and it'll be her as the reinforcements coming in. And is she all
there right now though? Because I mean, the way she was hiding up in the corner implied to me that she's maybe a bit out of it.
No, I agree. I think it'll be a case of that'll be her return moment as May will be her being the cavalry again, because that's again this link back to the start of the show with her reputation.
It's S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 7, Episode 1. Let us know what you thought of this one in the comments below. You can like and subscribe, all that stuff. Liking is really important on YouTube. It does let the YouTube algorithm know that you would recommend us to other people, and it'll share us out to other S.H.I.E.L.D. fans, other TV review connoisseurs, or whoever else. But do so. Please do so. You can, of course, support us financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your troubles. But otherwise, that is us. So get us on Twitter at @mail_fuzz for channel updates. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?